What's up? My name's Nate, and I'm going to teach you all the concepts you need to know to play in all 12 keys on the guitar with the capo. First concept is a chord. Well, what even really is a chord? A chord is just a collection of notes that we play together. That's a simple working definition. Let's take, for example, a G major chord. What we mean when we say a G major chord is really the collection of notes G, B, and D. So as long as I'm playing those notes on the guitar, we're playing a G major chord. So we have G, B, D, G, D, and G. All the notes are either G, B, or D, therefore we're playing a G major chord. Let's go to C major. The notes that make up a C major chord are C, E, and G. If I put my fingers like this on the fretboard, we have a C, E, G, C, E. Again, all the notes we're playing are either C, E, or G, so we're playing a C major chord. Reading a chord diagram. This is really important because it tells us where exactly to put our fingers on the fretboard and on the neck. And if you can read a chord diagram, you can learn a bunch of new chords. So this is a chord diagram. The thick line at the top is the nut of the guitar, which on my guitar is this little white part right here. The other horizontal lines below that are the frets on the fretboard. The vertical lines are the strings on the guitar. So we have E, A, D, G, B, and then E at the top. This is a G major chord. The numbers are telling us what fingers to put where on the fretboard. Number 1 is our index finger, number 2 is our middle, number 3 is our ring, and number 4 is our pinky. It's telling us to put our second finger on the 3rd fret of the low E string. So right here, it's telling us to put our first finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, our 3rd on the 3rd fret of the B string, and then our 4th finger on the 3rd fret of the high E string. So if we're holding these notes down, we're playing a G major chord. If we play a string without our left hand touching it, that is playing it open. So when we see those O's on a chord diagram, it means to play those strings open. In this case, it's that D and G string. Let's take another chord, for example, C major. We're gonna put our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, and then our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the B string. So when we play this, all the notes are either C, E, or G. We're playing a C major chord. Now you'll notice there's the zeros up there that are telling us to play our G string and our high E string open, but there's a little X over the low E string. And all that's saying is to either not play that string or mute it. So with my 3rd finger, I'm holding down that A string right there, and then I'm just kind of lightly touching that low E string so that when I strum it, you don't hear anything. Sometimes I'll kind of wrap my thumb around and it'll touch there too so that you can't hear it. The number system. This is one of the most important concepts to understand when you're trying to play in any key with the capo. Let's take, for example, the key of G. The notes in the key of G are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then G. We could also count them off with numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now, what's really important here is whether the chords are major or minor. Our 1 chord, our 4 chord, and our 5 chord are gonna be major. Our 2 chord, our 3 chord, and our 6 chord are gonna be minor. But right now, you can take that as a general rule of thumb. Don't worry about the 7 chord for now. We're not really gonna worry about that for our purposes. Our 1 chord in G is a G chord. Our 2 chord is minor, and 2 in G is A, so we have A minor. The 3 is minor, the 3 in G is B, so we have a B minor chord. 4 is major, the 4 in G is C, so we have C major, and so on. So then the 5 is D major, the 6 is E minor. Let's take the key of C. The notes in C are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C. We could also say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Let's go through the chords in C. We have C major for our 1. Our 2 is D and it's minor, so we have D minor. Our 3 is E and 3 is minor, so we have E minor. Our 4 is F major. Our 5 is G. our 6 is A minor, and then we're back to C. It's worth memorizing that the 1, 4, and 5 chords are major, the 2, 3, and 6 are minor, but when you're reading a chord chart, essentially if a chord is minor, it'll have a small little M next to that number. Chords versus chord shapes. We said earlier that chords were just a collection of notes played together. Well, all a chord shape is the shape that our hand is making when we play a chord. I have this G major shape here, this G major chord shape. If I put a capo on, I can pretend the capo is the nut, and I can play that G shape again. But what we hear is a different chord. The chord that we're actually hearing is A major, but our hands are still pretending, they're still playing like we're in G, but it sounds like we're in A. This now brings us to identifying which fret to put the capo on. In order to figure this out, we need to know the notes in what order they're in. So you've probably heard of all the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Well, there's a couple more notes than that. You've probably heard of like a sharp or a flat. The sharp is the little hashtag looking thing, and the flat is the lowercase b. What a sharp means is that it raises a note half a step or a fret. And what a flat means is that it lowers a note half a step or a fret. For example, let's take our note C right here. In order to play C sharp, we need to go up 1/2 step, and that note is C sharp. Say we also wanted to play D flat. We would start on D, lower it a half step or lower it a fret, and we have D flat. This note has two names, but it's the same note. We could either call it C sharp or we could call it D flat. Now let's go through all the notes. We have C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E, straight to F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, A sharp or B flat, B, and then C. As a general rule of thumb, if you're trying to play in a key between C and G flat, we can use C shapes. If you're trying to play in a key between G and B, we can use G shapes. I'll show you how this works. Say we need to play in the key of E flat. Well, first step is to identify whether it's in between C and G flat or G and B. Well, E flat is in between C and G flat. E flat is 1, 2, 3 half steps away from C. So we're gonna put the capo on the 3rd fret. And now we're gonna play, since we counted up from C, we're gonna play C shapes. And again, our hands are gonna feel like it's in C, but it's gonna sound like we're in E flat. So we have our 1 chord, our 4 chord, our 5, 6, back to our 1. We can play all of those C, our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 C shapes, but it will sound like we are in E flat. So we're really in E flat, but our hands are playing in C. Let's go to the key of A sharp, for example. A sharp is 1, 2, 3 half steps above G, so we put the capo again on fret 3. We can play with our G shapes, and it will sound like we're in A sharp. So we have our 1, our 4, 5, our 6, and then back to our 1. Again, we're playing all G shapes, but it sounds like we are in A sharp. Let's do one more. Let's go F. Well, F we know is in between C and G flat, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 half steps above C. So we're gonna put the capo on the 5th fret, and since we counted up from C, we're gonna use C shapes. So we have our 1 in C shapes is this, our 2 in C shapes, our 3 in C shapes, our 4 in C shapes, 5, so on. So this 2-step process includes first identifying whether we need to use C or G shapes, and second, which fret to put the capo on. In order to decide whether we need to use C shapes or G shapes, we just figure out if the key that we need to play in, again, is in between C or G flat, then we use C shapes. If the key that we're trying to play in is between G and B, then we use G shapes. Next, we identify which fret to put the capo on. Well, if we're gonna use C shapes, we count up from C, and however many half steps that is the same number that you're gonna put the fret on. If we need to play with G shapes, we count up from G, however many half steps that is the same number fret that we put the capo on. Let's go through a few more examples. Say we need to play a song in the key of E, and the chord progression is 1, 4, 6, 5. Well, our first step is to identify using C or G shapes. So E is in between C and G flat. It's not in between G or B. It's in between C and G flat. So we count up from C, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's put the capo on the 4th fret. Let's play our 1 chord. We have our 4, our 6, then our 5, and then back to our 1. There we go. Our hands are pretending or playing like we're in C. That's called using C shapes, but it sounds like we're in E, so we're really playing in E. Let's go through one more example. Let's say we're trying to play the same song, but we need to play in B now. B is within the range of G to B, so we know that we're going to use G shapes. We count up from G, 1, 2, 3, 4, so we put the capo on fret 4. And now we can play that same song. The chords were 1, 4, 6, 5. So 1, 4, 6, and then 5. Back to 1. If we need to play in C, we don't need to use a capo. We just play C shapes in the bottom of the neck. 1, 4, 5, back to 1. If we need to play in G, same thing. We use G shapes, bottom of the neck. We don't need to use a capo. One last thing I wanted to cover is slash chords. If you've read a chord chart before, you've probably seen, like for example, a 1/3. How we say that is a 1/3 chord. The first number is the actual chord. So if we're in G, that 1 is that G chord, right? Then we have the 3. That's not a chord, that's actually just telling you which note should be the lowest note that you play. In the key of G, we have the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, but that B is the 3rd note. So it wants us to play a G major chord, but the lowest note in that chord needs to be B. In G major, this is pretty simple. If we're using this chord shape, we can just take our 2nd finger off of the low E string, or just use it to mute that string. And then the lowest note we're playing is that B. Let's go in the key of C, for example. Well, the notes in the key of C are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, but that 3 is the E, right? And so the lowest note we have to play is an E, but the chord is still C major. This is really convenient in the key of C because our low E string is already an E, which is the 3 in C, so we can just leave that open. We don't have to mute it anymore. And now we're playing 1/3 in the key of C. When we're reading a chord sheet, we really want the number chart, not like the chord chart. It's still a chord chart, but we're gonna see numbers instead of letters. One of the best ways to learn music is to play music that you wanna play. So to actually learn and apply all of this stuff, I would just pick a song, any song that you like to play, look up on the internet what key it is, and then use our 2-step method to find which fret to put the capo on, and then just play along with the song. I've put some resources together for you in the description. The first is that 2-step process written out. The second is a cheat sheet or a table that shows you what key you're trying to play in, what shapes you need to use, and then what fret to put the capo on. And the third is the chord diagrams if you're using C shapes, and the chord diagrams if you're using G shapes. Alright, that's all the information I have for now. I hope this video was helpful. We covered a lot, so don't hesitate to rewind and rewatch some of the sections. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.